that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've now gotten through the second Bronte sister, as back in March of this year. When I reviewed Wuthering Heights, it was on a whim, as it was like 99 cents at the time on Kindle, and I was trying to go, and explore more of different material outside of fantasy sci-fi after reading Blood Meridian. And I had read that around like July or August of 2025. But I do my reviews ahead of time, so the review didn't come out till March. But then also on top of that, I didn't know a movie was being made of the book in February of 2026. So my review came out a month later to the movie, but it was completely unrelated. It just so happened to kind of line up like that. But anyway, I'm here today. I mean, I probably would have gotten to it eventually during my Gothic reads, as I try to save those for, my plan is for like 1 month every year. I gotta go through a couple Gothic novels, basically. So Jane Eyre was always going to be read at some point. But I'm taking this acting class. I have been since July of 2025. And the script I had was from a show. Doesn't matter. But the point is at the end of it, the character that I'm supposed to be playing notices Jane Eyre at this girl's desk that I've been talking to. So I end the scene by quoting Jane Eyre. And so I took it upon myself to read the entirety of the book before class the following week, which I didn't have to do. I just put it upon myself. So I read Jane Eyre, which is a very famous work of literature. I think Jane Eyre is easier to read than Wuthering Heights is, but I think Wuthering Heights has the more exciting plot. There's more gravitas. There's more drama. I think, I mean, there is some crazy stuff that happens in Jane Eyre, but by and large, it's fairly simple. But I also think it's way easier to get into and read. Like, there's definitely times where it was hard for me to read Wuthering Heights. I felt like there's never a point where like I was completely struggling with anything in this particular book. Also, just because the way it's structured is a bit different than how Charlotte's writing is a bit different from her sister, Emily. But I like them both for different reasons. Like Heathcliff is a far more interesting character than Rochester. I think they're both nuanced and morally gray, though Heathcliff quickly becomes a villain. I feel Rochester is a bit more complex and probably leading on the good side for me. Now I know, don't freaking do it. Don't be annoying. I know Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rice exists. Okay, I'm going to read it. Okay, it's essentially fan fiction. That book, it is a prequel novel to this one, but Charlotte had no communication with Jean. Okay, so I wanted to read Jane Eyre apart from that to have my own initial impressions, and maybe after reading this other book, if I love it, it will color my perception of this story on a reread. But that's not what this is. This is a read of Jane Eyre apart from any other influence, okay? So we'll get into that in spoilers. But basically, Jane Eyre is written by Charlotte Bronte and is a bit autobiographical. It's not actually. It's framed that way in the story, but of course, Jane Eyre doesn't exist. But I think Charlotte uses a lot of her own experiences to make this story happen. But Jane Eyre, if I had to before I even talk about any like light spoiler, not actual spoiler, but like plot synopsis, um, just thematically, I know this and both Wuthering Heights kind of get mislabeled as romance. I think Wuthering Heights is definitely not romance. It is a gothic horror revenge tale with romantic elements. I do think romance is a core aspect of Jane Eyre, but it's more about self actualization and integrity, I think, is what I want to say there. Because I think Jane Eyre's a very she's a very admirable role model for women, of course, but I think also for men in certain ways. Um, so ultimately, this story um, is about Jane finding her voice in a time period where it's not the easiest to do so. And then, of course, there is a romance involved there too. And while complex and maybe most definitely a little toxic, I do think there's genuine um, love there, and it's complex and it's messy. But I think there's real love there, and again, this is coming from my perspective, which uh, I don't know anything. I'm not married. I've had a few girlfriends in my life. I don't know if I can say I've ever been in love or at least be in a situation where it was mutual. I don't think that's ever happened for me. Um, so, my perception may be a bit skewed. I used to be, when I was a young lad, a hopeless romantic. I think it's hard to be that now. Reality is often disappointing. But all that to say, my perception, of course, what do I know about a fulfilling relationship? Because I haven't been in one. But I do think there's something there in the story. But Jane has to be one of my favorite female characters that I've read about in fiction. Like Catherine, Catherine's horrible. So is Heathcliff. Nobody in Wuthering Heights is like a good person. They are all just different levels of sucky to one another. Heathcliff definitely has it the worst, but until he just becomes a dick himself in the second half. Um, but Jane is really endearing, and I really love her personality and her wit, and her integrity, which we'll get into in spoilers. But by and large, ultimately, she has a really bad childhood. She's kind of, just neglected, not cared for, abused. And then she goes on to be at the school for a bit, where she, again, her reputation is put through the gutter until, it's overcome. And she eventually comes to work at this place where she meets Rochester, who she seemingly falls in love with. And later on, I'll leave the rest for spoilers, but she meets some people, she lives with them for a bit, she goes back and finds Rochester, and they live happily ever after, seemingly. I don't know. But that's non-spoiler wise, essentially. There's a lot of meat in between that, but that's essentially what you're dealing with. But I do recommend it. Like I said, I think it's far easier to jump into than Wuthering Heights. But the more exciting plot is probably Wuthering Heights. So there's that. But I mean, it's a classic for a reason, right? I mean, this came out in 1847 or something like that. Like this is an old book, okay? But I think one of the beauties of getting into reading as an adult, right, is like this specifically in like Moby Dick or Shakespeare is the type of thing that I would hate reading in school because it would have been forced upon me, right? But coming into it on my own time and my own pace and my own journey, I found myself really engaged with it. Also, this book is written very well. Maybe a hot take. I think the writing's a little bit better here than it is in Emily's book. Maybe a hot take, maybe not. I mean, there's some beautiful writing in Wuthering Heights, but there are so many this may be one of my few reviews where there is where I constantly have to look up quotes. We're gonna see, but I copy and pasted a lot of things that spoke to me or really endeared me to a character. So I guess we'll see as we get into spoilers. But absolutely, I think it's worth your time. You can go to library, get this. You could probably find it online. I mean, it's public domain. You could probably find it online for free. And if you want to spend money on it, if you get an ebook of it, like a Kindle, you're probably only spending like 99 cents, maybe a couple bucks. Like it is so cheap to get this book. So it's really at no loss to yourself to check out this book. But if you enjoy reading, I mean, it's a classic for a reason. And I really loved it. It's really tough because I think Wuthering Heights is far more interesting in terms of like what's actually happening in the plot. There's a lot of crazy things that go down. But due to personal enjoyment, I'm probably going to put Jane Eyre a little bit above Wuthering Heights for me, which maybe I'll take because I know Wuthering Heights is a very popular book with people. And I had a lot to say about it, if I remember. I mean, it's been, like I said, as of this recording, which for you is still further in the timeline of the world, but for me, it is It's February 5th, 2026. Okay, I reviewed Wuthering Heights back in like August or July of 2025, so it's been a bit. But again, really enjoyed it. Well worth your time. I want to get into spoilers and just really dive into stuff. So if you don't want that, there's the door. And I know I did a terrible job, people that are still here. I know I did a terrible job of explaining this book, as I always do, explaining anything. I'm a terrible reviewer. I'm a terrible book reader. I understand. But please, just bear with me. Okay. Also, this is a first-person narrative, which I forgot to mention, pretty important, because it's written back, like, you, the reader, you're reading her autobiography, even though it's not actually an autobiography. But let's see, the first quote. Miss Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so sombre and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercises was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgina Reed, which were all her, basically cousins. Also, something we pick up immediately is that Jane believes herself to be physically unattractive compared to her friends and family. Next note, John Reed, one of her cousins, was a schoolboy of 14 years old, 4 years older than her, so she is 10 in this opening section of the book. Large and stout for his age, with a dingy and unwholesome skin, thick lineaments, and a spacious visage, heavy limbs, and large extremities, he gorged himself habitually at table, which made him bilious and gave him a dim and bleared eye and flabby cheeks. He ought now to have been at school, but his mamma had taken him home for a month or two on account of his delicate health. Mr. Miles, the master, affirmed that he would do very well if he had fewer cakes and sweetmeats sent him from home, but the mother's heart turned from an opinion so harsh and inclined rather to the more refined ideas that John's sallowness was owing to over-application and perhaps to pining after home. So, her cousin's a very big guy, but he also likes to physically and mentally abuse her. So kind of an L on his part. So day one, proper quote. Of course, there's three back-to-back phone stuff, guys. I'm sorry. But the first one we got, my disturbed mind, like a dark deposit in a turbid well. Why was I always suffering? Always browbeaten, always accused, forever condemned. Why could I never please? Why was it useless to try to win anyone's favor? Dude, I feel that one because it's always Alex's fault. That's all I know. Work or home, it's always Alex's fault. And what other things? Can you tell me some of them? How much I wish to reply fully to this question, how difficult it was to frame any answer. Children can feel, but they cannot analyze their feelings. And if the analysis is partially effected in thought, they know not how to express the result of the process in words. I'm just sharing things that really is just like left up to me. I love the writing in this book, and there is a very truth to. I think we oftentimes, um, of course, children are children; they have to learn. That's for sure. But they are a lot more perceptive than we give them credit for, um, and she is enduring injustice constantly in this early section of the book, and she understands it. She like can feel it that it's wrong, um, like instinctively, but she can't fully just know how to express that out loud. On the third one, on the same occasion, I learned for the first time from Miss Abbott's communication to Bessie that my father had been a poor clergyman, that my mother had married him against the wishes of her friends, who considered the match beneath her, that my grandfather Reed was so irritated at her disobedience he cut off without a shilling, that after my mother and father had been married a year, the latter caught the typhus fever while visiting among the poor of a large manufacturing town where his curacy was situated, and where that disease was then prevalent, that my mother took the infection from him, and both died within a month of each other. Bessie, when she heard this narrative, sighed and said, "Poor Miss Jane is to be pitied too, Abbot." "Yes," responded Abbot, "if she were a nice, pretty child, one might compassionate her forlornness. But one really cannot care for such a little toad as that." "Not a great deal, to be sure," agreed Bessie. "At any rate, beauty like Miss Georgina would be more moving in the same condition." I think Bessie's is really cool. Caretaker for the most part, minus that little comment, kind of rude. But at the same time, it's she's saying like, yeah, if your daughter was in the same situation, you'd care more. But it is another smaller aspect of the story is also just Jane describes herself as very plain. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't really matter. She says she's plain. Many other people say that she's not very attractive. So I guess we can surmise she's not attractive. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which is something Jane herself will reiterate later in this very book about Rochester, who's also claimed to not be very attractive. But I think what's also just nice is a lot of books back then. I mean, even Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff, despite being of dark complexion, was a handsome guy. Same thing with Catherine, right? Attractive people. Here, we are dealing with someone very plain and ordinary, like most of the human population. But that doesn't matter. And it is a bit complicated with how rude Rochester can be, and where I'm getting ahead of myself, but it is more about the personality and the integrity and the person within that matters most to Jane, and to Heathcliff, to Rochester, to a point. I think that's nice. It actually does far more for plain looking or even ugly people than a Hunchback of Notre Dame, which always annoyed me a little bit. Why am I sneaking a Hunchback of Notre Dame reference in here? Well, just about how never judge a book by its cover is basically the essential premise of the movie and the story. But Quasimodo still ends up alone by the end, and they had to make a sequel to fix that. But the gypsy lady, Esmeralda, she ends up with the soldier, not Quasimodo. Anyway, moving on. She had many different teachers during this time. She had Miss Scathard, who would teach her history and English. She had Madame Perret, who taught French. We meet Helen Burns, who's because at this point in time, she basically gets trapped in this room for a bit, and there's sort of this gothic horror bit where she sees ghosts and stuff. I'm pretty certain none of that part's real, that she's just imagining that because she's a child stuck in the dark room by herself for hours and hours on end, which is super cool to do to a child. All for her fat boy hitting this poor girl and going, "Oh, it's your fault, frick you." But eventually she talks back. She enrages herself at her caretaker and says, "I don't want to live with you. I'd rather live anywhere else. Take me to school. Do whatever you want. I don't want to live with you. I hate you." Doesn't mean it. And even her own caretaker, Mrs. Reed, is a bit complicated of a character as well. But she comes off very evil in this opening section. But she does basically give in and take Jane away to go to this school. And so while she's at the school, she becomes friends with this girl named Helen Burns, who loves to read and probably has ADHD, as she has trouble focusing, as she says. And I have ADHD, so I'd understand. But yeah, they become friends really before anyone else becomes friends with her. I also forgot to mention Miss Temple at this school. That Miss Temple very much gave me, I don't know if you remember reading or watching the movie Matilda, but Miss Temple very much reminded me of the teacher from that movie. Not Miss Trenchable, but the other one. I forget the names at this point, but the nice one. I remember that one. Oh, another phone quote. Sorry, before we move on. And this is after she had just talked back to Miss Reed, but she says, something of vengeance I had tasted for the first time, an aromatic wine it seemed, and on swallowing warm and racy, its after flavor, metallic and corroding, gave me a sensation as if I had been poisoned. I love that, just like it's just like so poetic, and I love the way she writes that. That, you know, the vengeance, when you first take it, oh, so sweet, so good, like you got that one up on that person, because she generally stunted like an adult, like Miss Reed didn't know how to retort, really, because she had spoken truth, but she had also been disrespectful, which on the one hand you might argue she has every right to do. But again, Jane is not, and I'm not bashing, I'm not getting political or anything, and this is right, left, whatever, everybody in between. There is this sort of you have to one up, you have to destroy the opposition instead of actually listening and talking. And I don't know, I think it comes from a society that is just a lot different from this period. I mean, there's a lot of negatives from the 1800s, right, that we can look at. But Jane is like a Bible thumping Christian, and for whatever negatives you may take from that, there's also this like real strong sense of integrity and virtue in Jane, even back here. And maybe she wasn't a super strong Christian as a child, I don't know. But there's this instinctual moral thing within her where she, you know, yeah, she is fiery, and she has a voice that she wishes to speak. But she also, there is a part of her that's like, that's not the right way to go about it, though. And so while she enjoys the victory of one-upping this person and talking her down, there's also this, you know, this guilt, because, you know, it's not the proper way of doing things. I don't know. Maybe I'm not explaining myself well. I admire her integrity, and I'm gonna be a broken record by the end of this story. Next, first real sad thing that happens is that Helen is sick, and she has an illness, and so on her final night, Jane would sit by her side and hug her and have her arm wrapped around her neck, and she'd pass out and wake up the next morning to a dead child, because Helen passed away while she slept. We do a time jump of 8 years after that, and now Jane is 18, and she's going to be a tutor to this girl named Adela, who lives at this residence, which is very big important. She's going to go and meet somebody there, which will kind of catapult the rest of the story. I wrote modern quote for so long ago, phone. What did I mean by this? I guess I'm about to find out. It is in vain to say human beings ought to be satisfied with tranquility. They must have action, and they'll make it if they cannot find it. Millions are condemned to a stiller doom than mine, and millions are in silent revolt against their lot. Nobody knows how many rebellions, besides political rebellions, ferment in the masses of life which people earth. Women are supposed to be very calm, generally. But women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts so much as their brothers do. They suffer from too rigid a restraint, too absolute a stagnation, precisely as men would suffer. And it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say that they ought to confine themselves to making puddings and knitting stockings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. It is thoughtless to condemn them or laugh at them if they seek to do more or learn more than custom has pronounced necessary for their sex. I guess that's what I meant by that. We also, around this time, meet Mr. Rochester, who is a 35-year-old man. So this man, I'm 25. This man is 10 years older than me. And I'll say at certain times, this man acts younger than me. We also learn that his first name is Edward. So Edward Rochester. Also, she meets this man as his horse almost tramples her, which I think is named Mahomet. I think he was referring to the horse, so I think that's his name. For being all the way back in the 1800s, I really like the banter that her and Edward have at this opening moment of their meeting. Edward likes a genuine intellectual conversation, and I think that's really cool. But as Jane's living here at this place and everything, one night there's a mysterious fire that sets on Edward's bed, and Jane rescues him. And this is sort of the first time Rochester hasn't been particularly nice to this girl. He's been kind of insulting her, kind of acting like a prepubescent teen when you like someone. But this is the first time, instead of just light flirting or teasing, like a real genuine romance is blooming between the two. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So my next quote is this: "Most true is it that beauty is in the eye of the gazer. My master's colorless olive face, square massive brow, broad and jetty eyebrows, deep eyes, strong features, firm grim mouth, all energy, decision, will, were not beautiful according to rule, but they were more than beautiful to me. They were full of an interest, an influence that quite mastered me, that took my feelings from my own power, that fettered them in his. I had not intended to love him. The reader knows I had wrought hard to extirpate from my soul the germs of love there detected, and now, at the first renewed view of him, they spontaneously arrived, green and strong. He made me love him without looking at me." I will say, we're about to get to it, but Rochester can be quite a manipulating little butthole, but we'll get into that. My next one, we'll see what I meant by this, but I find this very romantic. Alex Salcedo. What did I say? What did I write down for this? "He is not to them what he is to me," I thought. "He is not of their kind. I believe he is of mine. I am sure he is. I feel akin to him. I understand the language of his countenance and movements. Though rank and wealth sever us widely, I have something in my brain and heart, in my blood and nerves, that assimilates me mentally to him." My next note: "I love Jane's mind so much." So this is my next one. "There was nothing too cool or banish love in these circumstances. Though much to create despair, much too, you will think, reader, to engender jealousy. If a woman in my position could presume to be jealous of a woman in Miss Ingram's, but I was not jealous, or very rarely. The nature of the pain I suffered could not be explained by that word. Miss Ingram was a mark beneath jealousy. She was too inferior to excite the feeling. Parting the seeming paradox, I mean what I say. She was very showy, but she was not genuine. She had a fine person, many brilliant attainments, but her mind was poor. Her heart barren by nature, nothing bloomed spontaneously on that soil, no unforced natural fruit delighted by its freshness. She was not good. She was not original. She used to repeat sounding phrases from books. She never offered, nor had, an opinion of her own. She advocated a high tone of sentiment, but she did not know the sensations of sympathy and pity. Tenderness and truth were not in her. Too often she betrayed this by the undue vent she gave to a spiteful antipathy she had conceived against little Adele, pushing her away with some contumelious epithet if she happened to approach her. Sometimes ordering her from the room and always treating her with coldness and acrimony. Other eyes beside mine watched these manifestations of character, watched them closely, keenly, shrewdly. Yes, the future bridegroom, Mr. Rochester himself, exercised over his intended a ceaseless surveillance, and it was from this sagacity, this guardedness of his, this perfect clear consciousness of his fair one's defects, this obvious absence of passionate sentiments toward her, that my ever-torturing pain arose. I love Jane Eyre. But also, this love she feels for this man that is not outwardly expressed interest, explicitly so. I don't know. There's something to that. As I said, I've been in love a few times in my life as a 25-year-old man. I've yet to meet someone mutually that shows that pathos and that passion toward me. Of course, I can't read people's minds, but it was I know, I've never experienced that. So, it's just, I don't know. There's, I love her mind, I love her convictions, and I love the strong language she uses. Maybe it's a little cringe today, maybe it's a melodramatic or extra, as the kids would say. But I think there's really something to the poetic language that Charlotte breathes into Jane in these passages, and I love it. I love her brain. I didn't really have a picture of what Jane looked like, to be honest. I know they gave me descriptions, but I was fascinated by the mind more than anything else, and yeah, loved it. We also get to this part where Rochester, Edward, this 35-year-old man, disguises himself as this old lady to kind of probe whether or not Jane likes him, rather than just asking like an adult. I do think Rochester is a more complex character than I think some people that read this book give him credit for, but I do have to say, what a manipulative and childish thing to do. Bro, you are 35. You are a 35-year-old man. You are 5 years away from 40. Just tell her. Just tell her. There's also a different time. People may argue Jane's like 18, 19 here. He's 35. What are you doing? Right? But to be fair, different time. But also, for example, my grandpa, he originally married my grandma Kathy, who was a year older than him. Or like 6 months or something like that. And then divorced, blah, 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 blah. But when he got remarried to my grandma Melanie, she was 16 years younger than him, right? So she's in her mid to late 50s right now. He's in his early 70s. So, yeah. But they're happy. They're good. So, what do I know? Something I wasn't really expecting to happen. While, all this romance stuff is going on with Jane and everything, with Rochester and all this stuff, Jane finds out that her aunt is not doing too well. The one who hated her. So she goes back to visit her anyway. And while heading back to visit her, she learns that her cousin, who abused Jane in the opening part of this book, the big kid, apparently he killed himself, which has really not helped her aunt's mental state. Jane's aunt dies hating Jane, but also not hating her and adopting her. I think Mrs. Reed felt a lot of regret over how she treated Jane, but I think she was too prideful to admit that she was wrong. And so rather than just saying, I'm sorry, she claims she still doesn't like her, but then put in an effort for adoption. So, and I can understand that. My stepfather will try to, through action, show you he's sorry if he feels he's in the wrong. But he'll never just man up and tell you, I was in the wrong, I'm sorry. And I think Miss Reed is dealing with a similar thing here. Phone again. This is probably the most famous speech from the book. Well, before that, I just like this little moment. But She says, "Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your great kindness. I'm strangely glad to get back again to you, and wherever you are is my home, my only home." Yeah, yeah, okay, all right. But no, this is the big one that people typically, even if they haven't read the book, or if they've seen maybe the 2011 movie, which 2011 is a really long time ago now. Oh my God. My brother turned 1 year old in 2011 because he was born in 2010. So, and he's 15 now, about to be 16. He's probably 16 by the time this video is up. I'm getting old. But anyway, there's multiple adaptations of Jane Eyre out there that you can watch. My point being is that this quote is usually well known by most people. For this whole section. Oh, there's one more quote before that. I'm getting there. Sorry about that. "I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love Thornfield. I love it because I have lived it in a full and delightful life, momentarily at least. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds and excluded from every glimpse of communion with what is bright and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous, an expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester, and it strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking on the necessity of death. Where do you see the necessity? Yes, only where? You, sir, have placed it before me. In what shape? In the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and beautiful woman, your bride, my bride. What bride? I have no bride." Right, so I'm not going to continue that. Another annoying, super frustrating aspect to Edward's character here is the fact that he kept allowing Jane to believe that he was going to marry Ingram just to see how jealous she would get. He never intended of marrying Ingram, ever. It was always Jane. His eyes have been set on Jane, but he goes out of his way to do this childish bullshit, and I'm sorry to use the big word, but bullshit, in order to determine things about her instead of just talking to her. And I find that very frustrating and annoying. So I do think he's a heavily flawed guy. We will get to where I defend him a bit, which maybe I shouldn't because I'm a man and da-da-da. But I'm giving my perspective. I don't care what that other book says. We will get to it. But, yeah, so just a whole bunch of annoying teenage stuff from Edward in this particular section of the book. But this is the big stuff here. And this is really, this whole thing here is the reason why I read this book in the first place, because of my script, which had this quote in here. So I'm very excited. "I tell you I must go," I retorted, roused to something like passion. "Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, that I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart, and if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I'm not talking now through the medium of custom and conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet equal as we are. For a little while, you will perhaps be as you are now, a very little while, and then you will turn cool, and then you will be capricious, and then you will be stern, and I shall have much ado to please you, but when you get well used to me, you will perhaps like me again. Like me, I say, not love me. I suppose your love will effervesce, big words, in 6 months or less. I have observed in books written by men that period assigned as the farthest to which a husband's adour extends. Yet after all, as a friend and companion, I hope never to become quite distasteful to my dear master. Distasteful, and like you again. I think I shall like you again and yet again, and I will make you confess I do not only like, but I love you with truth and fervor and constancy. Yet are you not capricious, sir? To women who please me only by their faces, I'm the very devil when I find out they have neither souls nor hearts, when they open to me a perspective of flatness and triviality and perhaps imbecility and coarseness and ill temper. But to the clear eye and elegant tongue, To the soul made of fire and the character that bends but does not break, at once supple and stable, tractable and consistent, I am ever tender and true. Had you ever experienced of such a character, sir? Did you ever love such as one? I love it now. But before me, if I indeed, in any respect, come up to your difficult standard, I never met your likeness, Jane. You please me, and you master me. You seem to submit, and I like the sense of pliancy you impart. And while I am twining the soft silken skein around my fingers, it sends a thrill up my arm to my heart. I am influenced and conquered, and the influence is sweeter than I can express, and the conquest I undergo has a richery beyond any triumph I can win. Why do you smile, Jane? What does that inexplicable, that uncanny turn of countenance mean? But yeah, that is not the quote that I thought it was that had the, is it coming up? It might be coming up. Anyway, Jane has a dream, or is it a dream, that she is attacked by a vampire. So that is something. But that is not the thing. It is not a vampire. In fact, what we learn is that Rochester is in fact married. He is married. He claims his wife has gone insane and he has left her in her attic all these years. And that he had wanted to find love again, and so I tried to keep her a secret. Now, again, here's the thing. Again, I don't care what Wyatt Sargosa C says. That is by a different author in a different time, and she did not consult with Charlotte Bronte on what she would like to say. We can all have our opinions on whatever this book is saying, on whether it's right or wrong, or this or that, but I'm judging the book on what it is telling me, on what it's expressing to me, not on what some other book written years later says about it. I will read that next, though, so we will see what I think about it. That being said, as far as this book is concerned, and you also take in some historical context here. This is the 1840s. Many times, husbands would just send their wives off to a mental institution, even if there's nothing wrong with them, just because they were pissed off at them. And there is historically, like, they were treated horribly in these situations. Horribly. Okay? Horribly. Actually, kind of reminds me of that sci-fi novella I read, the Spider Moon of whatever, that story. If any of you remember me talking about it, where he just sends his wife up there to this asylum. Should he have left his wife in an attic? No, but people really exaggerate things. But like, he left her in a chain, to suffer and die there like a prisoner. Let's be clear here. He had someone looking after her 24/7. Okay? He had somebody making sure she was fed, making sure she was clean. He just wanted nothing to do with her because, as he put it, she was insane. Now, there may be more nuance to that. We don't really get Bertha's perspective here. Okay, I understand that. I understand there's room for development there for her character alone and what's really going on in her mind. But, again, as far as this book is concerned, she, for whatever reason, she lost her mind. And she constantly wanted to kill him. And I'm sure it was not easy for Bertha, who kept realizing that her husband keeps having all these, because he admitted this is not okay. This is an objective wrong on Edward's part, that he kept having mistresses throughout his marriage. He kept having other women. That's wrong. That is wrong of him to do so. And the book doesn't really chastise him for it, but it really should. So I'm all for that. Like, he's not like a great person. But at the same time, what was he to do? Like, she was, again, as far as this book is concerned, she was crazy, right? So he made sure she's fed, made sure she's taken care of, and had a protector looking after her. I'm not saying that that's okay or that's the ideal solution here. I'm just saying it wasn't, as far as this book is concerned, and the way it's presenting it, to me at least, it was an act of compassion. He recognized that she was crazy. He also didn't want to be a complete and utter dick. So he provided the means to keep her somewhat well. Okay? And yeah, he lied about it. Who wants to go on a first date and be like, hey, my ex is crazy and she's living in my attic? I understand. Also, during this time, I don't think he was able to because of insanity or something like that, I don't think you're allowed to break up with your wife because of that. I think today, no matter what the reason, you could just divorce your partner. But I don't know. I've never had to divorce anybody, so I wouldn't know. But I don't think he could divorce her. But he was still relatively on the young side. 35 is not old, right? And he still wants to get married. He still wants to find love. And I can't hate someone for wanting to find love. I can't hate somebody for that. And it is love. He's not looking just for lust. He wants love. He wants, he may sound angry when Jane talks back and when she expresses herself as an equal, but that is something he admires about her. I mean, throughout this whole book, we constantly hear from the both of them. They're both plain-looking people, and neither one of them are the most gorgeous-looking people in existence. But their love makes them find that in each other, even if it's not, objectively true, whatever you want to say. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and they're both looking for like this sort of like intellectual stimulus from one another. So, and it's complicated, right? It's not like an easy answer. I mean, I don't know what I would do. I'm not leaving my wife in an attic, but I've also never had to deal with a wife that's like trying to burn me alive. So I don't know. But that being said, I think people give Rochester a lot of crap, but I think it's a complicated case. I don't think he's a great man. I don't even think he's a good man or a man that we should aspire to be like. I think he's human, but I also don't think he's anywhere near a villain. Heathcliff is a villain, okay, and people love that guy because he was justifiably angry in the first half, but he's not justifiably okay in the second half. So now, again, I hear that other book makes Rochester way more of like a villain, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think it's a complex issue. Jane's conviction. My next note. Let's see. Oh, comply, it said. Think of his misery. Think of his danger. Look at his state when left alone. Remember his headlong nature. Consider the recklessness falling on despair. Soothe him. Save him. Love him. Tell him you love him and will be his. Who in the world cares for you? Or who will be injured by what you do? Still, indomitable was the reply. I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendless, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. I will keep the law given by God, sanctioned by man. I will hold to the principles received by me when I was sane and not mad as I am now. Laws and principles are not for the times when there is no temptation. They are for such moments as this. When body and soul rise in mutiny against the rigor, stringent are they, inviolate they shall be. If at my individual convenience I might break them, what would be their worth? They have a worth, so I have always believed. And if I cannot believe it now, it is because I am insane, quite insane. With my veins running fire and my heart beating faster than I count its throbs, preconceived opinions, foregone determinations are all I have at this hour to stand by. There I plant my foot. I love her. But yeah, well, no matter how complex the issue is, Edward's married. And Jane can't be with him. First off, he lied to her, was dishonest with her. She should be more mad at the manipulating that went on earlier, but she's not really concerned about that. She's mainly just the wife part. But she should be more mad at him. But she can't be with him. She desperately wants to be. She's like, yeah, I mean, the wife is insane, whatever. Like, I want to be with this man, but the principle of it, she cannot do it. I love her integrity. What can I say? I wrote, I have never known love. That was my own note. And now I've said it out loud. I don't know if that was only meant for me, but the quote that accompanied that note I wrote myself was, let me ask myself one question. Which is better? To have surrendered to temptation? Listened to passion? Made no painful effort? No struggle? But to have sunk down in a silken snare, fallen asleep on the flowers covering it? Wakened in a southern clime, amongst the luxuries of a pleasure villa? To have been now living in France, Mr. Rochester's mistress, delirious with his love half my time? For he would. Oh yes, he would have loved me well for a while. He did love me. No one will ever love me so again. I shall never more know the sweet homage given to beauty, youth, and grace, for never to any one shall I seem to possess these charms. He was fond and proud of me. It is what no man besides will ever be. But where am I wandering? And what am I saying? And above all, feeling. Whether is it better, I asked, to be a slave in a fool's paradise, said Marsulis, fervored with delusive bliss, 1 hour, suffocating with the bitterest tears of remorse and shame the next? Or to be a village schoolmistress, free and honest, in a breezy mountain nook in the healthy heart of England? So she packs up and leaves, essentially, without taking any money or any food or anything, or she brings a little knapsack. But then she leaves it on the carriage or whatever, so it doesn't matter. She rides into a small town with ultimately nothing, and comes across Saint John Rivers, who is a faithful Christian, but doesn't know peace, and essentially takes her in. I mean, before that, we do get these nice little moments where some, common folk provide her with, some porridge or food or whatever. But it is St. John Rivers who allows her to come home and be fed, which we later learn, big ultra contrivance and just luck of the draw here. She just happens to come upon two sisters and a brother who happen to be her long lost cousins. Oh, she's got more cousins. She has family again. Woo! The more crazy part of this story is how her cousin is like, yo, God wants me to go to India to be a missionary and tell people about Jesus Christ. And God also definitely told me, my cousin should be my wife. Listen, I don't actually love you, and I want nothing to really do with you, but I think it'd be really good if we go to be, if you go to India and you can be my wife. And we're not gonna actually do anything because I have no interest in you sexually or emotionally like that. But I can't take you to India just as my sister, because then or cousin, because people are gonna assume we're doing things anyway. So I'd rather just be something so I don't get judged. Is kind of what it sounds like to me. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but ultimately he asks her to marry him, and she's like, no, and that causes friction between them, for a good long while. And she's spending time with her newfound family, and she really likes them and everything, but her relationship with her cousin, John, is being very much dismantled and ruined here, because of the whole not marrying him thing. We also learn around this time that Jane has an uncle that died and left all of his money to her. And it was like £25,000, which she split between, St. John and her two sisters, which is one of the reasons he decided he would ask her to marry her. And she splits it 4 ways. So she gets £5,000, which is still a lot for that time. It's probably still like $1 million back then. And gives it to her two sisters and to St. John. I wrote down, despite the £25,000 Jane inherited now, she could marry anyone, even Rochester. She would rather, through cousins, have two sisters and a brother, and so wished to divide her inheritance between all four, leaving them with £5,000. And she cannot live with herself to be wealthy while they are just getting by. Another reason to love Jane Eyre. But I kind of jumped ahead of myself, because that all happens. She's now rich. She's now wealthy. She's now a person of status, which she wasn't before. And, of course, then she says no to marrying to her cousin. And ultimately, as we near the end of the book, we learn that the Rochester home, Thornfield, has burned down because of Bertha. And Bertha jumped off and killed herself. Edward wanted to make sure everyone got out safe, but didn't get himself out in time. So while the rubble basically saved him from burning alive, also because of whatever was going on, I think he got one of his arms chopped off. and he became blind. So now he's not very rich, and he's crippled and blind. And this is when Jane kind of comes back into the fold. She meets him, she talks to him, and again, this whole thing is sort of like perfect poetry here, because the whole time they were basically equals, at least intellectually speaking. But Rochester always had this sort of veneer of superiority because of his wealth, because of his status, because of this, because of that. And that he had to rise up her status if they were going to marry. I didn't really mention it, but earlier he was mentioned, like, I'm going to get you, like, these outfits, we're going to get these clothes, we're going to have this big wedding, it's going to be great, it's going to be grand. And she's like, I don't want that. Because, she had to rise up in status if they were going to marry or whatever. But now she's the wealthy one. She's the one full of status, and he's nothing, or he feels like nothing. But she loves him anyway. And again, that's just like people say that, would you love me if I'm still a worm? But here's this man, like, he's gonna need constant attention and help. Like, he can't see, probably needed help wiping his butt. Maybe. I mean, that should be pretty easy. You just go behind, just go like that, I'm just saying he needed assistance. And she's like, no, I love you, and I will help you. I will take care of you. And they do. They get married. And it does end, with this sort of like miracle, God's providence, God's grace, God's mercy, whatever you want to call it. But he does regain his sight a bit. It's not perfect. He still can't read or write, but it's enough to make out people's faces and stuff. So when he has a kid with Jane, he's able to recognize that the kid's features look like him, so he's able to see well enough, and, he can walk around on his own without needing help. He can feed himself, Of course, he still needs a lot of help from Jane, but they essentially live, happily ever after, seemingly. But again, still, the romance, while kind of a core aspect of the story, I don't think is the core purpose of the story either. I would understand when people might mistake it for romance, but I do think it's more in part Jane's growth. I mean, we start her off as this kid, and she's very outspoken, very loud, very boisterous, and she has something on her mind. She's gonna speak it. She's gonna tell the adults what's what. As she becomes a teenager to a young adult, 18, she is a bit more docile and a bit more, toned down. She still holds all those opinions in her head. She just is slow to speak, quick to listen. But when she does speak, it's sharp, and you're gonna listen. And she very much shows that dynamic with Heathcliff and St. John very much often. And it's great to see. And again, I'm not a woman, so I feel part of this story I can never fully appreciate. I do feel, there's still a sort of thing where she's still beholden by this sort of marriage situation. That's sort of like the best outcome for you in those days, is it not? I don't know. But there's a lot of self-actualization, and of course a lot of proto-feminist things for this time period especially. I mean, it's very, we are equal. I'm that beautiful writing, I'm speaking to you through our spirit now, I loved it. I think the dialogue in this, in the writing in this book is really good, and very pleasing. And I love Jane, more so than just being a romance, and self-actualization and all that, and self-reliance, and strength of character. It is just that, again, I would go back to integrity, to that strength, to persevere, to hold true to her values amidst everything, and to speak her mind. And I really loved Jane's character for all of that. And I'm not smart enough to fully articulate everything I'm trying to say here, but it's a classic for a reason. And, sometimes I read stuff like, I read Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. I recognize why people like it. I recognize why it's a masterpiece. I didn't enjoy it, though. Maybe I'll enjoy it another 20 years when I read it. But, I'm honest when I say I don't enjoy a story. I really loved this story. I loved it. You know what? Yes, absolutely. I like this more than Wuthering Heights. I think after just going through all this with you guys again, I did. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's well worth your time. Boy or girl, doesn't matter. I think everybody can really enjoy this book. There's a lot to get out of it, and there's a lot that I'm not talking about because I don't feel particularly there's certain things not my place to discuss. If that's for other people in the sphere of influence to speak their minds on. So I'll leave that to all of them. Okay. I'm just a simple man making my way through the universe as best I can. But I loved it, and I'm excited to read more. I'm excited to read their sister Anne at some point. Probably taking a break from the 1800s period for a little bit, but I will probably read that at some point too. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know what you thought about this book in the comment section below. And if you haven't, let me know after you've read it. I don't know. Come on back. You should have been watching this far though if you haven't read it. You freaking sneaky guys. We're at an hour though, so I'm gonna go. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give a thumbs up. And yes, I will give you my thoughts on Jane Erye's book next week. So until then, guys, be more like Jane. Be more outspoken, confident, and holding true to your values, even when it's easy to let them go. And remember that you are all beautiful, man or woman, no matter what. And you're all deserving of love. And I hope that you may all one day find it, but that you never shrink yourself down in order to do so. Which I can relate to that aspect. Even as a man, I've definitely shrunk myself down in relationships. So, anyway, till next time. Stay safe, be healthy, be happy. Bye-bye.